Do I need cables for good sound? Today we're connecting speaker cables properly, and I know it might sound and look a little intimidating at first, but with a few steps, you're going to be a pro setting up your sound system. And for that, we have our expert Brandon with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm Brendan. I work in the electronic lab here at Teufel, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, let's just dive right into it. What different types of cables are there and what are they used for?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So you have basically all cables can be split up into two groups. You have an input cable and an output cable. An input cable can then be split up into two more groups, whether it be analog or digital. Digital, for example, might be an HDMI or an optical cable, and HDMI being this one here. And an optical cable is in here on the table. Then analog cable, for example, could be this one here. This RCA cable. Basically, their job is to send cleanly the signal from the TV or the source, wherever it's coming from, to the receiver or the amplifier. And then from the amplifier, you then have the output cables, which sends the signal to the speakers.
Okay. For example, I have a hi-fi setup at home. What cables do I need for that?
Most people with hi-fi systems, they're using it in their living room and it's not going over, long distances. For that, a typical, really normal RCA cable is pretty normal for an input. However, if you're going over larger distances, then an XLR, so a balanced analog input cable, could then be used. And then output, a really normal plus and minus cable.
Could you explain a little more what plus and minus means?
So plus is basically the potential for the signal that's coming out, and then minus is basically the reference. So even in alternating current, you have a plus and minus. In order to have any type of voltage, you need a reference to where it's supposed to be referring to.
Okay, so we distinguish between plus and minus, and if I look at the amplifier, that is distinguished in colors as well,
in colors, right? Yeah. So red is always plus, black is always minus. If, for whatever reason, someone were to switch the colors around, nothing will break. And it's just that the speakers are then inverted. All that basically means is that whenever there's supposed to be a plus voltage wave, it's actually a minus voltage wave. So the speaker actually sucks itself then in, and the sound will sound almost exactly the same. Nobody would probably really notice it until you then get a speaker that's correctly wired together. And then that speaker, theoretically, you can't hear it because the sound waves then cancel each other out.
Okay, so then I'd have to check and simply switch to the correct.
Yeah, you basically just have to then switch it up.
If we look at the table, we have the different cables collected right here, and in the center we have banana plugs.
Yeah, those are the banana plugs, yeah.
Could you maybe explain what they are used for?
It's to create a good connection on the back of the amplifier, because most amplifiers have a banana socket. Basically, the banana plugs are used so that you can then quickly connect and disconnect your speakers. So they're really good for if you're switching out speakers consistently, if you have, like a home studio setup or something. And the different cables that we have here, we have the thin cables, which is the black one. And those are used for either low power systems, especially over short distances. The larger cables there could be used for higher wattage sound systems. And then the very large cables could then be used for longer distances, basically. The thickness of the wire, all it has to do with anything is how far can you go with the speakers and how loud it can play and how much wattage it can pull.
The thicker the cable is, the longer the distance you can use it for.
Yeah, so the thickness of the cable is a lot like the wideness of a road, and the cars being the electrons or the music that's then flowing. The wider the cable is, the bigger the road is, the more cars they can fit through. So the more power can go to your speaker.
But you wouldn't say that a thicker cable necessarily makes better sound.
No, for example, if you were to use that really thick cable on a 25-watt speaker, it doesn't matter how far away it is, pretty much. You are basically kind of wasting money a little bit because anybody can just grab the thickest cable and that's the safest thing to do. However, if you want to then kind of save money, or if you have an issue of weight, so for example, if you're wiring a system in your car or whatever and you're worrying about weight, or if you're doing it on your bike or something, and weight is a big factor, then obviously you want the thinnest cable that you can possibly use. You don't add extra weight for no reason.
Would you say that there's like a ground rule for thickness for a cable? I mean, other than distance?
2.5 square millimeters is a pretty standard thickness for a cable. I know that I could use them for up to 100 watts probably. But then if you obviously have anything more, or if you're going over longer distances, then you could go one step further.
If we look, for example, at our, most popular stereo speakers like Ultima, Theater, and Definion, Could you give us a recommendation for how thick your cable should be?
For Ultima and Theater 500, probably use the 2.5 square millimeter because the power handling of the speaker doesn't probably need anything thicker of a cable than that. However, for Definian, because it's a higher wattage speaker, I would then use the 4 millimeter, especially if you're going over longer distances.
So maybe the takeaway here is that the cable thickness should match the distance you require it to be.
Yeah.
And rather than, thicker is always better.
If you want to save money and you want to do it basically kind of correctly, calculate over the distance and how much wattage you're going to be needing and how much energy you need, what kind of cable do you need for that specific setup.
We've spoken now a lot about wired setups, but there's also wireless setups. Maybe we can dive right into this topic. Yeah. Do you see a difference in quality if you use a cable or if you just use a wireless setup?
I mean, I know that, so most customers, if they're going to look at it and they're going to play music on whether it be a wired setup or a wireless setup, they're not probably going to notice a difference in sound quality. There is a large latency, especially with Bluetooth, almost a quarter of a second, sometimes more than a quarter of a second long. Our subwoofers, for example, they have a wireless module in it, and that cuts the latency down to 20 milliseconds. However, if they're going to look for a hi-fi setup, then, they want to have the lowest latency as possible. And so I would then recommend to not do a wireless setup if you're looking for, hi-fi, because they're looking for like the cleanest sound possible. And, wired is going to be always better for that.
So would you say that cables give you more stability in that kind of sense?
Yeah, cables give a lot more stability, but then wireless definitely gives you the ability to have multi-room and everything like that. So you can then walk around your house and listen to the same song everywhere in your house. And with cables, it's pretty hard to do because then you have to wire cables all in your walls and ceilings and everything like that. You should definitely inform yourself about the pros and cons of each different system, and then definitely decide if you would rather have more like accessibility with the wireless sound system, if you want a cleaner sound and really true hi-fi quality with the wired system.
Let's imagine that I have my front speakers wired, and then I also have my rear speakers, which are wirelessly connected. Could there be a latency, and is that hearable?
There could be a latency. However, we do have some kind of tricks so that the front speakers then play in sync with the rear speakers. It could be if the setup is then wrong, or if the setup is, falsely connected and whatever, that you could hear a latency if something's not working properly. However, in most situations, you probably won't hear it now.
And in the case that something is set up incorrectly, what do I do then?
I would first probably, it's kind of a meme at this point, but I would turn them off and turn them back on. And most times that kind of fixes it. But if that doesn't fix it, then I would definitely look into the settings of either the TV or the amplifier. If you're using an AV receiver, you could then look into the settings of the AV receiver, and then there's probably some system in there where you can then set a delay to the rear speakers and everything.
So now we've spoken theoretically a lot about cables and how to connect them, but let's put this into practice and see how we handle our sound setup and all the wiring. With that, we go into the challenge where we kindly ask you to set up a sound system.
Here I have a 2.5 square millimeter cable. Here are banana plugs, and then here we have a digital input cable and a subwoofer cable, which works the same as a normal RCA cable, except with an RCA cable you have a red and a white, which corresponds to the red and the white back here. To wire the speakers, you take a little piece of this cable here, or however long you need for your setup, and you cut to length. It's good to make sure that you do not coil this up on the floor somewhere if you have too much, because then you create a coil and that's bad for the speaker. The next step would then be to take the wire and split it out like this. And I always do this with the black is the negative and the one without a stripe is then plus. I then take my wire strippers, and then you have a red and a black banana cable. You want to unscrew these a little bit, and I never twist these because if you twist them, you could theoretically mess with the surface area of the wire because the surface area is kind of already set. So I leave the wire as it is right now, and this part of the wire does not have the stripes, so that goes in the red here, and I slide this in here, and I tighten this down with the screw up at the top. The black stripe goes to the black. And then on some amplifiers or receivers like this one, there are these little insulators here inside of these banana sockets, and that you have to take out in order to be able to put these in here. So then the black goes to black here, and sometimes you have to push pretty hard to get those in there, and the red goes to red, and then you basically just do the same at your speaker. At the speaker, you'll have also a red and a black terminal. The subwoofer cable, which also works as a RCA cable, can then be plugged in back here in this receiver. And the next in this system would be the HDMI cable or the digital input cable. So they most of them have these little plastic clips on them, which are on the cable to protect this cable whenever they're being shipped. If this goes to the TV, you plug this in the EARC port. And let's say, for example, you have a TV, you have this, and you have a gaming console, then you can then plug it into the game here. And if you have movie doesn't necessarily mean TV. It means, for example, if you have a Blu-ray player and your Blu-ray player then is connected to your TV. So you then plug your Blu-ray player instead of into your TV into this, and then the HDMI out then goes to your TV for your Blu-ray player. So last but not least, we have our power cable here. You have two sides. You have the one that obviously goes into the wall, which fits in the wall, and then you have this weird looking end. This end plugs into the amplifier or receiver like that. Then once that's done, you can then plug this into your wall. And once you plug that into your wall, you then have sound in your living room.
Well, thanks, Brendan, for being here and giving us very interesting insights and tips into how to connecting your speaker cables. We can see that it's not real magic, it's just connection logic. And once you've done that, you're very likely to enjoy the best sound in your living room. And if you enjoyed watching the video, press the like button and follow our channel. Bock auf noch weitere Soundthemen? Dann schau doch hier vorbei oder hier vorbei. Und wenn du dich zum heutigen Thema noch einlesen möchtest, in den Caption findest du unsere Blogbeiträge. Da sind auch die Produkte von heute markiert. Oder du kommst einfach mal im Store vorbei.